October 1940. Dawn breaks over the Pindus Mountains. A storm is coming, but it's not from the sky. It's the largest army Europe has ever seen. German Panzer divisions, undefeated across Poland and France, rolling toward a tiny nation the world assumed would fall in days. But something happened that Hitler never expected. Greece didn't just resist. Greece stopped the Nazi war machine longer than any country Hitler had attacked before. And the cost was brutal. How did a small, mountainous country with barely any tanks, no air superiority, and almost no allies manage to stall Hitler's empire for 219 days? This is the forgotten story of the Greek miracle. October 28, 1940. The chill mist of the early morning clings to the rugged peaks of the Pindus Mountains on the Greco-Albanian border. The only sound is the rhythmic, uneven crunch of boots on the gravel of the winding pass, mingled with the low, continuous grumble of approaching artillery. Sergeant Major Ioannis Koutras of the Hellenic Army's 8th Infantry Division grips his Mannlicher Schonauer rifle, the damp air biting at his exposed hands. He squints north into the gloom. For weeks, the ominous silence across the line had been heavier than the mountain fog. Now the silence has broken at 3 a.m. local time. The Italian ambassador to Greece, Emanuele Grazzi, had delivered a non-negotiable ultimatum to the Greek Prime Minister, Ioannis Metaxas, demanding Italy be allowed to occupy unspecified strategic points. The response, delivered only 3 hours later, was the single defiant word that would echo across Europe: "Oki, no, now." The Italian 9th Army, spearheaded by the elite Julia Alpine Division, surges across the border into Epirus and Western Macedonia. Their objective is simple: a swift, morale-boosting victory for Mussolini's regime, securing a crucial strategic flank in the Balkans and cementing the Duce's standing alongside Hitler. The intelligence officers in Rome had assured their commanders that the Greek defense would crumble instantly, perhaps even within a week. They saw a small, poorly equipped army fighting a war of necessity, not capability. They were catastrophically wrong. Koutras watches his company commander, Captain Petros Voulgaris, raise his hand. The captain is a man of the mountains, his face weather-beaten, and his resolve granite hard. "Hold your fire," Voulgaris whispers, the urgency in his voice cutting through the growing distant roar. "Let them feel comfortable." The terrain itself becomes Greece's first, most potent weapon. The mountainous landscape channels the Italian advance into predictable, easily defended choke points. The Italian Julia Division, though trained in mountain warfare, finds the passes treacherous, their supply lines stretched thin and vulnerable to the tenacious Greek defense. The Hellenic soldiers, fighting for their homes and their very existence, move with a familiarity and ferocity that astounds the invaders. The counterattack begins not with a bugle call, but with a terrifying unified roar as Koutras and his men rise from their hidden positions. Volleys of rifle fire rip through the Italian ranks. The Greeks don't just hold their ground. They push forward, leveraging the same brutal weather and terrain the Italians had sought to conquer. By mid-November, the seemingly impossible has occurred. The Greek forces, executing a brilliant strategic withdrawal followed by a relentless offensive, drive the Italian armies not merely back across the border, but deep into Albanian territory. Mussolini's planned lightning campaign stalls, then reverses into a humiliating rout. The Greek advance secures the strategic city of Koritsa, Korka, and pushes for Tipolinu, threatening the complete collapse of the Italian forces in the region. The Axis's Balkan flank is now not secure, but dangerously exposed. This unexpected, stunning resistance, the Oki, translated into bloody, heroic action, forces a chill-in recalculation in Berlin. Hitler's master plan for the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, is predicated on a stable, compliant southern European front. Now that front is a volatile, burning mess. The Führer, watching Mussolini's failure with a mixture of contempt and growing strategic alarm, knows he must intervene. The Mediterranean flank cannot be allowed to collapse. The Wehrmacht must be diverted, their irreplaceable mechanized divisions and Luftwaffe squadrons pulled away from the crucial buildup on the Eastern Front. The slow, meticulous clock of the invasion has just received its first devastating delay. April 6, 1941. The sun rises over the Thracian plains of Bulgaria, illuminating a scene of immense, coiled military power. The delay has ended. It is now Operation Marita, the German invasion of Yugoslavia and Greece. Generalfeldmarschall Wilhelm List, commanding the 12th Army, oversees the final preparations. The sheer scale of the force mobilized is a testament to Hitler's frustration and the strategic importance he now places on stabilizing the Balkans. A raid against the Greeks and the hastily deployed British Commonwealth forces attempting to bolster their lines are the elite formations of the Wehrmacht, the XL Panzer Corps, and the 18th Mountain Corps, equipped with hundreds of state-of-the-art Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks and supported by overwhelming air superiority from the Luftwaffe's Fliegerkorps 8, the famed Stuka specialist unit led by Wolfram von Richthofen, the Greek High Command. Despite their incredible victory over the Italians, knew this moment was inevitable. They had prepared the Metaxas Line, a chain of formidable concrete fortifications, observation posts, and interlocking fields of fire stretching 100 miles across the mountainous border with Bulgaria. This line, a smaller, more rugged version of the Maginot Line, was manned by the most battle-hardened Greek units. The German assault is devastatingly swift and coordinated. The Luftwaffe begins with saturation bombing runs against key infrastructure and defensive positions. Then the Panzers strike. While some German units push through Yugoslavia, others crash directly against the Metaxas Line. Near Rupel Pass, the defenders of Fort Rupel refuse to yield. The concrete bunkers withstand sustained direct hits from German 88mm flak guns used in an anti-fortress role. For 3 full days, the Greek garrisons in these forts fight with a desperate, suicidal bravery. Surrounded, subjected to flamethrower attacks and repeated artillery barrages, they do not surrender until the line is completely outflanked and ordered to stand down by their superior command on April 9th. The German commander, General Schörner, is so impressed by their tenacity that he allows the garrison commander, Major Georgios Dramalis, to keep his sword and orders his troops to render a full salute to the captured Greeks. This heroism, however, cannot halt the mechanized tide. The speed of the German breakthrough is staggering, largely because of the rapid collapse of Yugoslavia to the north. List's panzers hook south, bypassing the main Greek defensive lines and the British Commonwealth Expeditionary Forces, led by General Sir Henry Maitland-Wilson, positioned in central Macedonia. The goal is a strategic envelopment. The British, realizing their position is now untenable, begin a rapid, fighting retreat towards the ports in the south for evacuation. The diversion of forces, 10 full German divisions, including 3 Panzer divisions, over 1,200 aircraft, and thousands of support vehicles is now complete. This immense deployment has come directly at the expense of the buildup for Barbarossa. Every day spent fighting and diverting resources in the Balkans is a day lost to the limited Russian summer and autumn campaigning season. Hitler is securing his flank, but the clock is ticking faster than he realizes. April 27, 1941. German tanks, identifiable by the distinct Balkan Cross insignia, rumble into Athens. The swastika is raised over the Acropolis, a devastating symbol of the continent's conquest. For many, the mainland campaign is over. The Greek government and the royal family are evacuated, eventually finding refuge on the island of Crete. But the fighting spirit of Greece has not been crushed. It has merely relocated. The strategic situation is now centered entirely on this large, rugged island lying across the sea lanes of the eastern Mediterranean. Crete is essential. To the Allies, it is a vital forward airbase, protecting Egypt and the Suez Canal. To the Axis, it is the last major obstacle before dominating the entire eastern Mediterranean and securing a launch point for operations in North Africa. The British Commonwealth forces, having successfully executed the withdrawal of nearly 50,000 men from the mainland, Operations Damon and W, now consolidate their positions on Crete. The Allied Defence Force, commanded by New Zealand's General Bernard Freyberg, consists of around 40,000 men, British, Australian, New Zealand, and a significant number of ill-equipped but fiercely determined Greek soldiers who had escaped the mainland. Hitler, desperate to free up the Wehrmacht divisions for the Eastern Front, orders a rapid, decisive solution. He chooses the most daring and risky maneuver of the war to date, Operation Mercury, the invasion of Crete entirely by air. Using the elite German Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, the invasion is set for May 20, 1941. The plan calls for simultaneous mass landings around three crucial airfields: Mulum, Rethymno, and Heraklion. General Kurt Student, the father of the German airborne forces, is supremely confident. His paratroopers are the tip of the spear. The men of the 7th Flieger Division, highly trained, but crucially, dropped without their heavy weapons and dependent on quickly securing drop zones. The dawn breaks, clear on May 20th, bringing with it the roar of hundreds of German transport aircraft, the Junkers Ru-52, and the terrifying whistling descent of the paratroopers. The skies over Crete become a spectacle of falling silk. But the element of surprise, which is vital to airborne operations, has been lost. Allied ultra-intelligence had fully alerted Freyberg to the date and targets of the assault. The Cretan defenders are ready, waiting in concealed positions. The initial waves of paratroopers, dropping into fields and olive groves, are met with devastating, concentrated small arms fire. The results for the elite German airborne forces are catastrophic. The bloodletting on the drop zones is horrific, arguably the heaviest single-day's casualties the Fallschirmjäger suffered in the entire war. The Greeks, often fighting with antiquated rifles and even simple farming tools, rush the dazed Germans. The desperate, close-quarters fighting marks the beginning of a truly bitter 10-day battle. May 21st to 27th, 1941. The battle for Crete rages in a desperate, fragmented series of battles around the key airfields. The first 24 hours are a disaster for the invaders. At Rethymno and Heraklion, the German paratroopers of the I Battalion, Luftwaffe Regiment 1, are wiped out or scattered, their initial objectives unachieved. At Malum, the decisive action unfolds. The airfield at Malum is the key. Its possession means the Germans can fly in crucial reinforcements of mountain troops and heavy weapons, turning the tide of the entire operation. The New Zealand defenders, specifically the 22nd Battalion under Lieutenant Colonel Howard Kippenberger, hold the hill overlooking the airfield, Hill 107. The German command, realizing the catastrophic losses of their first wave, thousands of elite paratroopers killed or wounded, gamble everything on Hill 107. They concentrate all available resources, the surviving units, supported by relentless precision dive bombing from the Junkers Ru-87 Stuka squadrons, against the New Zealand position. Critically, a failure in communications and a lack of decisive counterattack leadership by the Allies allow the Germans to consolidate a tenuous hold on the western edge of the Maleme airfield. The sheer ferocity of the Cretan civilian resistance, however, is unprecedented. Driven by fury over the mainland invasion, villagers, men and women, arm themselves and attack the Fallschirmjäger with knives, axes, and hunting rifles. This civilian intervention forces the German troops to divert critical manpower for security and execute brutal reprisals, further slowing the pace of their advance and tying down combat troops, who should have been pushing forward. By the evening of May 21st, the Germans managed to land their first Junkers Ru-52 transport on the barely secured Malame runway, often landing under direct Allied fire. The plane crashes, but the flow of reinforcements, the 5th Mountain Division, begins. This infusion of fresh, heavily armed mountain infantry decisively shifts the balance of power. General Freyberg, facing overwhelming German air superiority, which decimated his communications and troop movements, orders a slow, agonizing retreat across the island towards the southern port of Sfakia. The Battle of Crete lasts 10 days. By the time the final Allied evacuation is complete on June 1st, the Wehrmacht has secured the island. But the cost is staggering. The German casualty rate for Operation Marita exceeds 25% of the attacking force, with nearly 4,000 elite paratroopers killed or missing. The Fallschirmjäger were so decimated that Hitler, horrified by the expenditure of his finest shock troops, forbade all future large-scale airborne operations. This incredible 10-day delay in action, coupled with the previous months of fighting on the mainland, had forced the commitment of over 17 Axis divisions tanks, aircraft, and infantry to the Balkans theater. The planned start date for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, had already been pushed from the initial mid-May target. Now the cleanup, regrouping, and redeployment of the Luftwaffe and Panzer formations from the scorched fields of Crete and the Greek mainland ensures a further, critical delay. The invasion begins on June 22, 1941, weeks later than originally intended, pushing the timeline dangerously close to the onset of the Russian winter. Summer and autumn, 1941. The immediate strategic consequence of the Balkan campaign, the Greek delay, is now being paid in blood and frozen steel on the Eastern Front. When Operation Barbarossa finally launched, the Wehrmacht achieved spectacular early victories. However, the plan was always predicated on a decisive defeat of the Red Army within the crucial 6-month campaigning window, concluding before the lethal Russian Rasputitsa mud season and the subsequent winter set in. German General Heinz Guderian, a pioneer of Blitzkrieg, emphasized that the operation was not a matter of time, but of kilometers. The weeks lost in Greece and Yugoslavia meant those kilometers became harder, slower, and ultimately impossible to achieve. 3 critical factors were directly impacted by the Balkan: diversion, delayed deployment, the necessary reorganization, resupply, and redeployment of the 12th Army's powerful formations, particularly the Panzer and Luftwaffe units. From Greece to the start lines in Poland and Romania took time that Hitler did not have. Crucial formations, including the XL Panzer Corps and Fliegerkorps 8, von Richthofen's Stuka squadrons, arrived late for the initial assault, reducing the spearhead's momentum in the opening weeks. Resource drain, the severe losses suffered by the elite Fallschirmjäger on Crete meant a key strategic asset was effectively neutralized for the duration of the war. More importantly, the diversion of thousands of transport aircraft and vital fuel reserves to the Balkan theater reduced the logistical support available for the initial thrust into the Soviet Union. The gates of Moscow. By the time the German Army Group Center finally launched Operation Typhoon, the decisive push toward Moscow in October, the Russian autumn was already descending. Marshal Georgy Zhukov and the Soviet defense were able to leverage the increasingly impassable mud that clogged the tracks of the German panzers and immobilized supply columns. Had the invasion commenced in mid-May, as originally intended, the German spearheads would have likely bypassed the early Rasputitsa, perhaps reaching the critical defensive line around Smolensk or even the immediate outskirts of Moscow weeks earlier. Those extra weeks would have given the German armies the dry ground necessary to maintain the relentless pace of blitzkrieg before the brutal cold of December arrived. Instead, when the German forces finally reached the gates of Moscow in late November and early December, they were exhausted, undersupplied, and facing the single greatest strategic threat, the Russian winter, which arrived with unprecedented severity. The temperature dropped to -30 circ, text, $. German tank engines refused to start, lubricants froze, and their summer uniforms offered no protection. The Greeks, fighting a small war of defiance, had ultimately purchased vital time for the survival of the Soviet Union. The ferocity of the defense, the commitment of the Oki, and the 10-day delay on a small Mediterranean island were now compounding into a strategic catastrophe for the Wehrmacht thousands of miles away. The Greek resistance didn't win the war, but it ensured the Eastern Front would not be decided by Hitler's timetable, forcing the decisive battle to occur not in summer, but in the crushing grip of the Russian winter. The sacrifice of one small nation altered the destiny of an entire war. Share this story of the Greek miracle to ensure that those who fought for freedom on the Pindus Mountains in Crete are never forgotten. If you want to delve deeper into the battles that shaped history, please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next Untold Stories.